Welcome to the Health Detective Podcast with Roberto Parker. Join strength and conditioning expert Roberto Parker as he shares his over 35 years of experience in training athletes and helping people achieve their fitness goals. Now here's your moderator, Chris Whiting, with Coach Roberto.
All right. Hey, everybody. Welcome once again to the Health Detective Podcast with Roberto Parker, Coach Roberto, the man who kicks my behind on a weekly basis, but also makes me the best version of me I could possibly be. Roberto, welcome to your podcast.
And it is hard to make the best version of you, Chris.
Yeah, what is it people say? You can't make chicken salad out of chicken shit, I think is how they put it. But you know what? You do the best with the raw materials that you're given, my friend. So how are you tonight?
I'm doing great. Just finished working a crew out at Keystone Park, and I'll see you there tomorrow morning.
I will be there at 6 a.m. tomorrow morning. I can't wait to run hills or swing sledgehammers or whatever you have on tap for us. So, yeah, I'll be going to bed early tonight, so I'm ready to work out bright and early. Welcome. So here's the show where we talk about nutrition, we talk about exercise, we talk about diet, we talk about supplements, all things health related from more of a holistic point of view. And what are you going to delve into tonight, Roberto?
Well, I kind of want to have a continuation of what we talked about a couple of weeks ago. We just give me a few hypotheticals, but I want to emphasize tonight about setting priorities and finding out what are the most important areas that you need to work on, because sometimes I think we try to do too much at one time when a person is trying to become physically fit. Are you in studio tonight?
I am in studio, yes.
Okay, great.
Yeah, trying it out again.
Okay, I think at times people become a little bit befuddled and overwhelmed because they read a lot of information on the internet, on social media about all these different so-called diet programs, exercise programs, hot yoga programs, keto, paleo, Whole30. So it gets a little bit overwhelming. So I'm going to put it like this. I'll give you an athletic example. I have trained athletes for many, many years.
Right.
If I have an athlete who comes to me, and let's say this athlete is 50 pounds overweight, but they want to improve their speed. They want to improve, let's say, their swing of the bat. If they're a baseball or softball player, they want to improve their vertical jump. So we could focus on improving their bat speed. We could focus on improving their vertical jump. But what's probably the main thing holding them back?
It's probably that extra weight, right?
Correct. It's that 50 pounds of weight that you need to focus on. Now, let's take it a little bit deeper than that. Let's say that, okay, I want to lose that 50 pounds, but let's set some realistic goals and priorities to do that. Everybody's not as motivated as you, Chris.
What?
No, they're not.
Sorry for those people. Wow.
I hate to shock you, but most people aren't that motivated. Okay, so we have to find out, what are you willing to put in order to lose that 50 pounds? You have to be realistic. Now, I as a trainer, coach, I got to be realistic with the person. If they say, I want to lose 50 pounds in 8 weeks, I'm going to tell them, you better have a heck of a prayer life, okay? Because that ain't happening in most cases. Right. So 12 months, 6 months, that's a little bit more realistic. Now, how much work are you willing to put in? What type of goals are you willing to have? It's okay to say, I want to lose 50 pounds. That's okay. But we got to go deeper than that. It's a little bit vague. What type of activity goals are you willing to do? And I think everybody should have an activity goal, some sort of physical goal, some sort of mental goal, and some sort of spiritual goal in life every day, if not every day, at least several days out of the week. In other words, let's say you're really, really weak, you're 50 pounds overweight or 50 pounds underweight, but you can't even do a push-up. So let's say every day you're going to do a half of a push-up every half hour. Okay. Let's say you just do a couple of air squats, like we talked about before. You get up every 30 minutes. Okay, that's a good start. That's doing something. That's an activity goal. You've got to have some sort of activity goal in order to start taking the steps towards the ultimate goal, which is your weight loss or maybe putting on more muscle tone. And so I know that people become overwhelmed with a lot of information, but you've got to take some of that stuff with a grain of salt because some of it may not be the best for you at this particular time. If you're not willing to put the work in to obtain that in a short period of time, or maybe even an intermediate period of time, it's probably not going to work. You got to find out how motivated are you as well, because everybody has a different motivation level in order to get to that ultimate goal. So I guess my point is, as a trainer, I want to find out what is the main thing that's holding you back, that's going to get you to the next point of success. And once we get to point B, let's get to point C and point D and point E, F, and so on, so on.
Right. Alphabetical. Gotcha.
Right.
Now, so question for you, and I think you bring up a good point. If you go out and Google, get in shape.
Oh my gosh.
Bombarded with so much information. And I think that for a lot of people, when they do that, that just paralyzes them because they're like,
exactly.
Okay, am I supposed to go high carb with good carbs? Am I supposed to go all protein, no carb? Do I go all carb with no protein? Do I lift weights? Do I do, anaerobic or aerobic exercise? You get a lot of conflicting information, or what appears to be conflicting information out there. So
yeah, and actually a lot of those programs you just mentioned will work, but I keep going back to my old cycle theory. Mm-hmm. Eat more, eat less. Exercise more, exercise less. Mm-hmm. It all will depend on the type of body build you have, the type of motivation you have, the type of metabolic type you are, if you're more of a high carb, if you're more of a low carb. And we can do evaluations and tests to at least kind of come close to where you are. Nothing is 100% accurate. I mean, you can draw all the blood you want to in the world and everything else, but it's not always going to be 100%. But if we can get at least over 70%, I think we're within the ballpark there. But even having said that, even if we find out exactly what your metabolic, what your body type is, you got to be motivated to do it. And if you're not willing to put in the work, at least to do a little bit of something every day, physically, at least starting out with 5 minutes a day, then you're just wasting everybody's time.
So question for you. You mentioned body types, and I don't recall the last time we went into this, but when you're the main body types that we hear about a lot are what? Ectomorph, endomorph, mesomorph?
Yeah.
So what are the general differences? Like broad strokes, how can you kind of tell what sort of body type you are?
Ecto is somebody who's really thinly built. Endo is somebody who's fairly plump. And meso is somebody with a little bit more of an athletic build, maybe broad shoulders, big muscular legs, maybe a narrow hip, maybe wide hips. And you can be a hybrid of those two. You could be an ecto meso, you could be a meso endo, you could be an endo ecto. I mean, there's a lot of morphing going on there. So, and no one really is exactly 100%.
So let me ask you a question I will immediately regret. What body type do you think I
am? You're probably, I'd say probably, I'm going to say ecto, meso with a little bit of endo. But, the reason I say a little bit of endo, you put on a little bit of weight the last few years.
I have. Yeah.
So you could probably control that. But if you're getting strictly as to what you're born with, you're not going to change that necessarily, but you can certainly add on. Even a person who's an ecto, who is somebody who is kind of a thin build, you can still be fat. We just call them skinny fat people.
Oh, yeah, I know some of those people. I might be one of those people, as a matter of fact.
Yeah, you could possibly be a skinny fat person, Chris, yes.
Thank you.
You could also be, let's say you're born with a really athletic build.
Yeah.
And you probably see this when you go back to your high school reunion. Some of the guys were really stud looking in high school, play football or maybe a wrestler or something, basketball player. Now those same guys are got a little bit of a paunch on them. So, that can happen too. It all relates back to your lifestyle.
Gotcha. Hey, and folks, if you have a question for Roberto, you can call us at 913-735-0060. That number again, directly here into the KCTK studio, 913-735-0060. Yeah, but I guess the point is, going back to how we sort of started this, is there's so much information out there. You really need somebody who knows what they're doing and can work with you independently to figure out what's going to work for you. Isn't that right?
Absolutely. Now, look, some people are very self-starters. If a person is willing to sit down and weave their way through all the minutia and what they read on Google or whatever WebMD and really read through the references and the information, you might be able to come up with a fairly decent program for yourself. But how many people are willing to do that and put in the time to do that? I don't think not too many people are. It's kind of like following the stock market, you know? I mean, how many people are really going to sit down and follow stocks all day long unless you're getting paid to do it? Right. So you got to know the ins and outs and how to navigate through that, because there's some bad stuff out there too now that are just people that are willing to trying to make a little bit of money and get rich quick just so you can pay them a little bit for this magic dietary program. And which brings point, there's nothing magical about anything. There's nothing magical about keto. There's nothing magical about just doing cardio. There's nothing magical about interval training. It's how you adjust it to what your lifestyle is and what your body type is and what you're willing to put in, because there's so many variables. And that's why people pay me, because I will sort through the variables and come up with a program for you. But you have to be really willing to be open and honest with me and trust me. Yeah. Because for the life of me, I have more people ask me, I read this about this, I read this article about this program, I read this article about that program, and some of the stuff they ask me about, I have no idea what the hell they're talking about because I've never even heard of it. So, you know, even as a trainer myself, there's so many things that come out on a monthly, yearly basis, this fitness program, this dietary program, and like I said, a lot of that stuff is bunk because they're just trying to make money on you.
Yeah, and hey, and we'll hit this again at the end of the show, but tell folks how they could get in touch with you if they are interested in taking the next step and getting proactive in their health and fitness.
Well, they're going to get proactive in health and fitness. Call me at 816-405-7703. Email is rwpsports@yahoo.com. Okay, Chris, give me some examples.
You want a question for me?
Well, yeah, I mean, just give me an example of, so for the listeners and viewers out there, just so they can kind of know where we're going with this session here. Give me an example of someone who's having some health issues, and I'll maybe give you some quick solutions.
Oh, okay. Paul's feeling in the spotlight here. So, okay.
It's just who you're looking at.
Let's say that somebody's gotten a little bit older.
Yeah.
They found out that they might be pre-diabetic and they want to reverse that. So they, don't have to get on insulin, become insulin dependent, and what have you. What can you do to start to turn that around a little bit?
You've got to get off the sugary stuff. Now, if you can't totally get off of it, you've got to drastically reduce it to so many grams per day. I'm going to say at least bare maximum 100 grams a day or less. Now, for some people, it might be less than that. It depends how severe your hyperinsulin sensitivity is, or insulin resistance is, I should say. So, because that being insulin resistant is probably the issue with 90% of Americans out there who have weight problem issues, which also opens the door for the coronavirus that we're seeing right now. Because if you have a high insulin and you are pre-type 2 diabetic, you are at a high risk for COVID-19.
Oh, wow. Okay. And just to give folks a frame of reference, you said around 100 grams a day. I saw a Coke can the other day, and I don't know why. Oh, no, that was 140 calories. I was going to say it had 140 grams of sugar, but that's not right. What would be like around 100 grams of sugar that people could relate?
Oh, man, you're probably looking at probably half a cup, maybe. Okay.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Half a cup, about that much. I can tell you that about 50 grams of sugar, you're probably looking at probably 2, maybe 3 bites of something that's sweet, maybe even like a small baked potato or something like that, be 50 grams. Even though baked potato, doesn't have high sugar, it still has a lot of carbohydrates in it. You're probably looking at about 50 grams. It might be about a half of a cup, maybe.
Okay.
Or less.
And I think you bring up a good point, because when you say, hey, cut back on the sugar, it's not just the sugar. It's things like white bread and those highly refined processed carbs, right?
Yeah, white bread's a little better than sugar because it takes longer. It doesn't spike the insulin as severely as pure sugar. And that was gonna be my next number 2 right there. Is after sugar, you've got to cut a lot back on the flours, like white flour. I would suggest try to eliminate bread, period. But if you can't do that, get the more fibrous type of breads, like the Ezekiel breads. But even having said that, don't eat a half a loaf a day. Maybe have, 1 slice a day, at the maximum 2 slices a day. Instead of white potatoes, convert to sweet potatoes, which have a lot less of a glycemic index to them.
Gotcha.
You can do that because those are better than white potatoes. Start consuming more protein, more fibrous, more fat, because protein and fiber have the best satiety value in terms of filling you up. Okay.
Right.
So if you're really trying to cut back your food cravings, eating more protein and more fiber being, things like cauliflower, broccoli, the cruciferous type of vegetables, those have high fiber.
And then aren't the healthy fats like good at satiating hunger as well? Like your
Yes.
avocados, olive oils, things
Yes,
like that.
those are good also. Yes, absolutely. Now, what you're going to find is some people might say, "Well, I don't like eating red meat." Well, that's okay. So if you don't like eating red meat, then eat stuff like turkey or chicken or seafood like cod or salmon or something like that. So you could even take a supplement like cod liver oil. They sell them in gel form tablets. I take cod liver oil during the winter in particular because I'm not outside in the sun as much, and it's because it's too damn cold out there. So I take a fish oil supplement in the winter time plus some vitamin D. So those are things you want to do, and you gotta, like I said, if you're high insulin, that means you gotta cut back on the sugar, a lot of the high glycemic index foods.
Hey, it might take just a little bit of a detour, but talking about, the COVID, the vitamin D question for you. So I've got 2 daughters that are both at the University of Missouri, and I saw a headline earlier this afternoon that they have now determined that there are at least 150 students on campus that are positive for COVID. So if you are in an environment like that, obviously, you want to follow the guidelines that are put out by health officials, but like nutritionally, what are things you can do to boost your immune system to maybe give you a little more protection?
Just talked about it, my man. Getting them off the sugary foods.
Oh, okay.
More good solid protein, more organic foods. Get off the processed foods. COVID-19 and cancer, by the way, love sugary stuff in your body. Cancer is attracted to sugar. COVID-19 is attracted to weak immune systems. Now, because these college students have COVID-19 doesn't mean they're going to be symptomatic necessarily, because at that age bracket, a lot of them are going to be asymptomatic. But the problem arises when they get around people that are older that can contract it people that are elderly, people that have compromised immune system. Once again, the people that are pre-diabetic are at very high risk. People that are heavy set, those endomorph we talked about earlier, they're at a higher risk. If you're taking any sort of cancer treatment, like radiation or chemo, you're at a higher risk. So if the students have to go back home and be around their parents who are at high risk, that's where it can get a little bit sticky.
Yeah, well, I'm really hoping that doesn't happen. I love my kids dearly, and I want them to be at school and have a good time.
Yeah. And stay there, huh?
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really do miss them, but I just want them to have fun outside of my house. I don't think that's so bad.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, who's judging me for crying out loud?
But did I answer your question about the insulin, though?
Yes. Yeah. I think
okay.
So you want to pull back, and I'm assuming activity helps with that as well. Like
absolutely, because what you want to do is cut back on the carbs, in particular the non-fibrous carbs. Non-fibrous carbs are things like definitely sugar is number one. Mm-hmm. Number two would be a lot of the breads. And even you got to be careful with the white potatoes, and even certain fruits you have to be a little careful about. You got to be careful of overripe bananas if you're going to make banana bread, or bananas that don't have any green in them at all, because they have.
You there, Roberto? Folks, we may have lost Coach Roberto. Hopefully he'll call back in if he's not.
Chris, how can we get a hold of Roberto?
Let me pull up his number here. One thing you can do if you're interested in working with Coach Roberto, which I would highly recommend. I worked with him for about 2 or 3 years, 10 years ago, and then I've been with him another year and a half, pushing 2 years now. And I will tell you that it makes a big difference in how I feel. I feel better. I feel stronger. And it's funny, too. When I came back this time, I was 10 years older than the previous time, right?
Mm-hmm.
My joints started hurting, and I'm like, oh no, maybe I'm too old to do this. But I found that if I didn't push things too hard, didn't do heavy weights, the more I worked my joints, the better they felt.
Mm-hmm.
So
I think Roberto, I think that's you, isn't it?
Yep, that's me, man. I'm sorry about that. I don't know what's wrong with my damn computer, but anyway, let's finish it up now.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, I was talking about cutting back on the breads and the potatoes and
right.
the fruit. The only type of fruit that you really should be consuming if you're serious about cutting back your insulin resistance levels are dark berries, like blackberries and blueberries and that kind of thing. You've got even red apples you got to be a little bit careful about. I would probably eat just green apples like Granny Smith's.
Love those. So tart.
They're not sweet, but they're more tart.
Yeah. Yep.
You got to really start reading labels. And we got into a little bit of that 2 weeks ago. You got to start reading labels a lot, because there's a lot of hidden sugars that they put in foods to make them taste better, like Gatorade. Gatorade, if you get the full strength Gatorade, they put sugar in that stuff. So you got to be careful with it. Now, they do make Gatorade now that's a little bit more watered down, I think. But you've got to be careful of that too, because a lot of times Gatorade appeals to young kids because they show these athletes on TV drinking a Gatorade or something while they're
I'm drinking a sports drink, so I'm healthy.
Yeah. Sports drinks really aren't that great. I mean, to me, you're better off just taking some water and putting maybe some lemon in it or something like that to give it some flavor. You just don't like the taste of water that much, but you don't really need sports drinks. Really are not that beneficial. I'm sorry, they're just not. They have to do a very good job of marketing them, but they're really not that beneficial.
And you mentioned the dark berries earlier, and I know those are good because they're lower sugar, but they're also packed full of antioxidants, right? Like you get other benefits from those than just the low sugar.
And they're loaded with fiber.
Ah, yes.
That's what you want to substitute as much as you can when your insulin levels are really high and you're having weight problems. You've got to cut back the sugar and increase the fiber, because fiber is what helps to fill you up, and fiber can help reduce your insulin hyper levels.
Well,
so,
that is great info, and I know a lot of people can use that for sure. And then just the added benefit, especially at this time, knowing that if you are pre-diabetic or diabetic, that it makes you more at risk for things like COVID. So anything you can do to help that. I know we got to wind up here, Roberto, but you want to tell people how to get in touch with you one more time here before we go?
Yeah, 816-405-7703. Email is rwpsports@yahoo.com. There's one more thing I want to talk about real quickly now. We've talked about this before. You know, another thing that people get bombarded with is, can I lose weight and put on muscle at the same time? It's extremely hard to do that. You have to cycle between 1 week focusing on losing fat and 1 week focusing on putting on more muscle tone. You can split up every couple weeks. So you have to cycle in and out what you're doing relative to exercise, eating, and throwing in some good intermittent plus long-term fasting, because fasting is what helps to boost your growth hormone level.
Yeah, we've talked some about that in the past. I think that's becoming more and more popular. I'm hearing more about it. Maybe we should do an entire episode.
Yeah, we'll do that next.
Yeah, committed to the intermittent fasting and different ways to approach that. So, as always, Roberto, you're a wealth of knowledge. Thank you so much for sharing it with folks. If you want to work with Roberto, give him a call or email him. And Roberto, I will see you at 6 a.m. at Keystone Park, ready to get my ass handed to me tomorrow morning.
All right, guys. Take care and God bless. Bye-bye.
All right, you too. Bye-bye.
Thanks for listening to the Health Detective Podcast with Roberto Parker. You can contact Roberto at 816-405-7703 or by email at rwpsports@yahoo.com with any comment or question you may have. Join us next time for the Health Detective Podcast with Roberto Parker. The Health Detective Podcast with Roberto Parker has been a KCTK production, produced by Roberto Parker, Chris Whiting, and Paul Lavoda. All rights reserved. For more information and content, email us at kctkradio@gmail.com.